Well, Glenn, welcome back in the seat, my friend.
Thank you, Joe. Good to be here.
Yeah, this has been a fantastic show, I think, at large for Medtech.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's the largest one and just a good vibe, good energy. I think that the energy around the industry is really picking up. Let's
And
see.
Scott Whitaker shared with me there's more than 300 banks, family offices, venture firms, PE firms here at the event. And I think that is all about this acceleration of innovation in medtech. And you were on a panel yesterday about innovation in medtech. So let's start there.
Sure, yeah. It was a great panel. I had three fantastic panelists, Mika Nishimura, who's on three MedTech publicly traded company boards, Joe DeVivo, who's the CEO of Butterfly, and Yulin Wang, who is a serial entrepreneur and founder of Computer Motion, InTouch Health, and now he's got a new venture as well. So we really had a nice perspective from different angles about innovation, how boards look at innovation, how founders look at innovation, how commercial CEO looks at innovation. And I think one of the things that really I get excited about is how do you bridge that, getting the idea to something that is sustainable and commercially viable. And we had some great discussion about how you need to navigate that, the valley of death, which requires investment, but it also requires persistence. It also requires a willingness to, maybe throw out the original idea and move a different direction, and a persistent focus on the customer and what they need, right, to really drive value.
Yeah, and that's really important. I'm glad that's coming up more and more, the customer, because the customer could be the patient in our world.
Yeah.
The customer could be the site of care.
Yep.
And the customer could be the clinician. Because when I say site of care, we're seeing more and more tech come in to the hospital ASC, outpatient surgery, as a structure. And you never saw that much investment money when you think about the digital transition that's going on, right? And the change management happening in there.
Yeah, absolutely. And so when you say structure, you mean from a financial standpoint, or?
Well, yeah, we can get into deal structure, but I mean like the bricks and mortar.
Oh, I see.
Right, the bricks and mortar of the hospital setting. So whether it's telehealth,
Yeah.
whether it's a workflow management, whether it's surveillance in the OR,
Yeah.
right? That customer is no longer the patient or the surgeon anymore, but
Right.
it's the institutional brick and mortar of where sites of care are occurring now.
Yeah, and Joe, I think you're aware that Deloitte and AdvaMed created the value framework back, several years ago. The whole mindset around that is that innovators can't just think about the clinical value of the product. They have to think about who the various customers are, who the stakeholders are, and how it impacts their business. Because the reality is that healthcare has this tremendous momentum that goes on. And it's financial momentum, it's workflow momentum, and as innovators, we really have to think about how will this new innovation fit into those models. Maybe it'll disrupt them, but if it does, we really have to make sure we understand the motivations for why somebody's going to say, I want to do this completely new way versus the old way of doing it, which is hard, right? That's change management,
Right.
big time.
That's right. But interesting, Deloitte has done a couple studies that have been, I think, somewhat seismic and shifting in the industry, and I want to jump into one that just came into mind when you mentioned that. You were involved in 2017, 2018, a discussion, a paper, a report that Deloitte put out, and I was sitting here with a good friend yesterday who was one of the people you interviewed for that, and it was about the change in deal structure that has taken place in biotech, but as yet had taken place in medtech. And today some people are calling it build to buy, some are calling it structured deals, some are calling it a call put that protects both sides. So are you seeing the industry move that way?
Yes, which is really exciting.
Only 8, 9 years later, but we're getting there.
Exactly. And So my passion around it is that I was actually just looking at this report. Back in 2005, we did a study in the biotech side of the industry and looked at what's going on with these alliance deals. Because what we found is that, over the years, the amount of innovation that was actually happening in the large companies was going down, down, down. And so they were much more reliant on some kind of a structured deal with an early stage innovator. And the early stage innovators needed that too to be able to survive and make it through the development cycle. And so we really drilled into these co-development deals back then for biotech. And they were doing it, obviously to get access to money, but they wanted a well-structured deal. They wanted a commitment from leadership, really to the relationship. They wanted access to the therapeutic area knowledge for knowledge transfer and expertise, and they wanted some degree of alignment in their strategy. So to know that they're teaming with an organization that has a like mind. And those were the real motivators for how those deals were structured. And you saw those just blossom. And so when I really started drilling into Medtech 15 years ago or so, I thought, where are these deals? How come we're not seeing the same number of deals in medtech that we do in biotech? So when we did this study back in 2017, that was like the primary hypothesis to say, why not? And if not, how can we start to get this more accepted in the industry?
And we're seeing them now, and there's organizations that are being built around that. Orchestra Biomed, Revival down in Austin with Rick and Todd. And you're seeing deals like CathWorks with Medtronic on that, Backbeat with Medtronic. And so some of that is for the financial support because money has sort of become a little lean.
Yep.
But it's really for the big strategic because the core competencies in the strategic don't serve, the core competencies of technology development in the big strategics don't serve where healthcare needs to go.
Yep.
But manufacturing, supply chain, quality systems, finance, funding, and so those two sort of organisms need to come together, but the key's in the governance, isn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, it's interesting, as you were saying that, one way to look at it that struck me is that, and I think this term has been used a lot in history, so I'm not the originator of the thought, but you're really talking about a virtual enterprise, right? That because some of that innovation is not taking place as much in the large cap companies, it's now key that overall innovation through development, through commercialization and all the capabilities you talked about has to be a little more virtual. But like any enterprise, whether it's it's cutting across actual companies or it's within a company, you got to have good governance. You got to know the decisions that you got to make along the way. You got to know who's making those decisions. You've got to have very specific endpoints or goals that you're looking to achieve, and so you could probably overdo it with governance, but you can absolutely underdo it with governance.
Look at J&J and Oris deal that went down. That was an under governance, it's me saying it, that was an under governance of a relationship that had holes in it that didn't serve anybody.
Yeah, and it's in everybody's best interest to get a deal that is well governed. And one of the interesting things is oftentimes these deals are structured by one group of people, and then they're managed by another group of people. And so there's this handoff that takes place, and the mindset and the knowledge of what it takes to make this deal really successful doesn't necessarily get carried over. And I think, again, that has to do with governance, but this is more the large company than the small one, because typically the small one is the same people, but on the large one it's not, it's different. So, one of the muscles that I think needs to be built in the industry is that discipline for having a really good handoff between the deal makers and the people who execute the deal. and making sure that the practical understanding of what it takes to execute it is built into the deal. Like I said, some of those points I was rattling off earlier, right, that are built into the deal to start with.
And it's interesting you bring that up, because as I watch Medtech continue to evolve and these virtual institutions, we can call them NewCo, because that's what, anytime there's been a JV between organizations before they put a name on it, it's always the NewCo.
Yep.
There's going to be an expertise required in that governance, and I think it almost has to be a facilitator that has a fiduciary responsibility between the two, because I'm involved in a couple of them right now. Your organization that is on the innovation side is working with the strategic, and there's a handoff going back and forth, that the markups that occur, but there's nobody in the middle talking sense, negotiating on behalf of both, and taking best practices and an algorithm of what went wrong or what went right in 5 previous deals. And that person in the middle, I think we're going to see more and more of them evolve within MedTech.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was one of the reasons why we did this initial research 20 years ago, is to help provide some lessons learned and some rules of the road in terms of how to structure one of those deals properly. What's interesting is since then, we as a firm have done a bunch of work with the governance of those deals too, because after a period of time, and it can be literally years into it, the process can get complicated. And let's take an example of when you get to a point through development and you're getting to some of the marketing decisions, for instance, you have to run all that through compliance, you have to run it through your legal advisors, you're typically running it and having your marketing agency develop all the print. If you're not efficient about how you do that, you're spending a ton of professional services money at the same time too, and you're wasting a lot of people's time internally. And I've seen this in spades, right, where this aspect of governance can play, in so many different ways. So it really needs to be tight, and it's helpful to have an objective view into that for sure.
Yeah, and you bring up a really important point. Historically, you and I have been around the industry for 30 plus years. Historically, when you designed a medical device, and it's still the mindset, unfortunately, with some of the large OEMs, is it was an analog device that you designed, and when it finally went through FDA and got cleared or approved, it went to work and it was pretty much done. But now we're getting involved in these digital platforms, whether it's a surgical robotic platform, whether it's an oncology-based platform, where that product platform changes when you put 10 in the field, when you put 100 in the field, and you incorporate AI in there, and that ongoing development of what we're learning along the way, and that constant change of the product. Yet your whole product development team in these structured deals might be left behind as the handoff occurs to the buyer. And that core competency is no longer in the buyer.
It's a really great point.
And then what about the retention of the team that built that? So I think that governance is going to enter into, when do we start bringing people onto the team from the large OEM to get insinuated into that bridge, so when the handoff occurs, we still have the tribal knowledge in that handoff.
Well, this gets back to the panel discussion yesterday, and we were talking about innovation, and with innovation, ideally you're starting with a vision of really how you're going to solve a problem, transform healthcare, depending on how bold you're trying to be, right? But you're starting with a vision, and again, a persistent focus on solving problems in the marketplace. And for these digital solutions now to be really effective, and you see what's happening on the consumer tech side of it, right? They have to continue to push that boundary aggressively to keep adding value, to keep solving problems, to keep that vision alive. And so you're absolutely right. I mean, that handoff If you're handing it off to just a group that's going to do maintenance on it versus true continued innovation, that's a problem, right? And so the whole digital realm gets even more complicated.
Look, the proxy for that, or the great avatar for that, is Intuitive, right? So let's look at what they've done really well. They're the biggest digital first native player in surgical robotics.
Yeah.
There's others trying to get in, but that's all they think about. And that platform, the D5, the Da Vinci 5 that came out, was, I think it was 10 years based on the previous platform. So during that time, as you bring out that D5, you can guarantee that that Intuitive team has so much under the hood for, rather than play with the FDA right now, so much under the hood, whether it's their tower, whether it's visualization, whether it's an algorithm, whether it's AI, but it was built by the same internal R&D team and philosophical approach that there was no handoff. So it'll be really interesting on what kind of reach 4 years, 5 years, 7 years downrange will be there from the company that builds it till the handoff.
And just to add to what you said, I mean, for surgical robotics, the real nirvana around innovation is not just the robot itself, it's around the data, right? It's around the data and then the insights, and to be able to drive improvements in quality, to get find out how procedures affect outcomes in a much more precise empirical way. And physicians are all driven based on empirical evidence, right? So that's the holy grail here, is to get the data to drive further insight and innovation in the surgical process. Initially, when these robots are launched, we don't have the data. So you got to continue that whole pursuit of excellence for years afterwards to really get to the holy grail. And so yeah, you're absolutely hitting the point where that continuity of focus and any handoffs that occur in that process are going to challenge your ability to get to that holy grail.
That's right. So as we wrap up, what's your vision over the next 12 to 18 months in medtech at large, and also for yourself?
Great. Well, for medtech, I think I just continue to be thrilled with this industry. It's a fantastic space. We're lucky to be in it. I'm happy to see the energy back and the swagger that I think was tough 18, 24 months ago. And so there's a lot more energy back in the industry. I am excited about our team and our practice and where the industry is going. I am going to have to ride off in the sunset at some point and have successors. But I'm going to continue to stay involved in this industry, and I'm really excited about getting more into the topics we're talking about of innovation. How do you really sustain it, protect it, structure it, and transform the industry in the process? So, excited.
You've got a body of work behind you and a mind share that I think is second to none in that area. And I always appreciate your insights.
All right, appreciate being here, Joe.
Thank you, my friend. I'm Joe Mullings from the floor of the MedTech conference in Toronto. Be well.